Hi guys. Today we're going to be doing the database side of Android Studio. As you can see, I'm using Android version 4.0.1. So I've already created a project here, which you guys should go and do. So this is what the project looks like. So for those who maybe want to go through the application creation themselves, they can do that. But I'm not going to really be doing typing as be working with time, just doing a quick explanation. So maybe we can just do this. We can just create a new project, choose an empty activity, go next, give it a name. I'll just call it whatever you want to call it. In this case, just call it db, maybe dbase tutorial. Okay, once you've done that, make sure you're on you can choose whichever level of minimum SDK you want to develop for, but usually I just use 19 or 21 so that you can have many targeted devices. So go ahead and click finish and let the project load. Okay, now that we have our new project here, I'll just show you guys maybe my Gradle build. These are my Gradle settings. This is usually what I develop on. These are my settings. If you want the exact same settings, you can use them. But yeah, go ahead and pause the video if you want to see how the settings look like. I'm gonna just sync that. Okay, then what I'll show you is my project structure settings that I'm using. I'm using a Gradle build 0.4.1 and my Gradle version is 6.1.1. You can go ahead and download those if you need to. Okay, now what you want to do is create a new package. So go right click, go to new, go to package, and what you want to call this, you want to call it database, and then go ahead and hit enter. And this just helps us make our application development neat. So go ahead and create a new class called database and call that database DDL. Hit enter and create another one there called database DML. Right, there we go. So once you've done that, I'm just going to copy the one that I already did here so that it's faster. So this is the database DDL. So open up database DDL, paste that. Okay, and then I'm going to get the database DML. Okay, then I'll just explain the code as we go through. Okay, Right, so just close all your other tabs, the ones you're not working on, and then I can explain. So let me start off at the database DML. Why do I call this the database DML? In SQL, we have what are called DDL commands, which are data definition language. These are statements or commands that are used to create and modify the structure of a database and database objects. So some of these commands we will see as the create and drop as we use here. So just to show you, I'll just remove these imports. So the first thing you want to do is you want to extend your database DDL by SQL Open Helper. Go ahead and import that class. Now, when you extend the Open Helper, there are some methods that will be imported as well, which are the onCreate and the onUpgrade method, which are here at the bottom, that come with this import here. So go ahead and import a context here. Now the context here, the context meaning that this is basically it's a class which allows us to get access to resources that we might need. So in this case, like if we want to give access to maybe a certain file to allow it to maybe gain some attributes or variables, this is what we use the context for. So here we use the super because we want the whole application to be able to access this this context here. So we give it the context, we use the database name, we create a database name and the database version, we put them in here, make sure the factory is null. So this is as good as if I put 1 here, it would be for the database version. So in this case I've already made a string, so we won't need to do that. So that's, then you create these two. Looking at the access modifiers here, we're making it a private static and we're making it final because we don't want this variable to change. That's why we're using the final here. Then we move down to the second segment. We create a table name for our database. So you can call your table name whatever you want to call it. Also make sure when you are doing your database name you put .db, meaning database, right, so that it will create this db file. Here we now move on to the columns that are going to be in our table. So we use public because we want them to be accessed throughout the whole application, different from the private access modifier, and using final because these also we don't want them to change. So first of all, you can call it really whatever name you want to give it, but just to make your code understandable, we'll make this column 1, 2, 3 to 5, and here we can see that the first column is an ID, so this is going to be our primary key, right? So that's why it's best to use ID or underscore ID like that, just or to make it better for your application. So this is just really a preference thing, but like it should be ID mostly. Like always try and make sure that your first column is always an ID. So now we're going on to create a SQL query statement for creating this table with these columns. So again, this is also a public static final because we want the whole application, this access modifier, we keep it public because we want the whole application to be able to access this, and we keep it final because we don't want it to change. So here now we continue to put the name here, and then we create a string here to say create table, as we're going to be writing SQL query statement. This is a create table query statement in SQL. So here we add our table name. So create this table, which is that table. We put our parentheses here, and then we create our first column, which is ID, and we give it a value type of integer, and then we add primary key auto increment. So we're stating that this is a primary key and we don't want to keep adding our own values to this primary key. You can, so you won't have to put the auto increment, but in this case it's just much easier for you to have this auto increment, so that if your first ID is of 1, then the next one will automatically be 2, 3, and so on. So then you put a comma, then you add your second column, you give it a value type with a comma. So also note these spaces that you see here for when I'm writing. These spaces are very significant because your text would look all clustered like this together in one statement. So it's good to create these spaces. So when you write create table like this, it will create something like create table, and then because there's the space there, it will increment the space, and then it will put your table name like that. So that's why those spaces are there. It's very good to take note of them. After which you want to import the SQLite database. This onCreate method would already have been it would have been implemented here from this SQL open helper. So make sure to get that imported. So now then we say db.execute query, and we put our execute query statement, which is this one. As you can see, it's lighted up and it's showing you, like, this is the table names. It's showing you the type. The data type is white. This is I'm using Material Light theme for my Android Studio. That's why it might look different from some of the other Android Studios that you might see out there. And here we can see even the brackets have highlighted white, so take note of that as well. I think this is also a plugin that I'm using for highlighted text. So yours, depending on how you've customized your Android Studio, might not look like this. This almost looks like Sublime. So here we write the statement and we execute our table here. That's what we are doing here. We want to execute this SQL statement that we've written here. So otherwise, if we didn't write this here, we would have to write this whole statement here and put it inside here like this. So this is what we were going to have to end up doing if we didn't create this, but it looks much neater when it's like this. Then we move on to the onUpgrade method, which will obviously be coming in import, but if you're typing it out, it's good to be like this. So in the onUpgrade method, we have the SQL database, we have the old version and the new version. So all we're doing here is we are whenever you do SQL, you have to create a statement for dropping your table, because when you rerun your application, it's going to start complaining to say that because you're creating a table here already, it's going to complain and say this table already exists, so it won't create the table and it will end up crashing the app. So it's best to remove that whole table out of memory or delete it entirely and create this table here. Then this is where we put the onCreateDB. Okay, that's basically it for the DDL commands. As you can see, the create and drop statements here for the DDL commands, we have put them here as the drop statement here for the on upgrade and the create statement here for the on create. Right, then go to the DML. Here we got the DML. The DML stands for data manipulation language, or statements or commands that are used for managing data within tables. Some commands of DDL are the select statement, the insert statement, the update statement, and the delete statement. So basically this is where you're going to be doing the other half of the CRUD functions like upgrade and delete instead of read and create. So here let me delete the import so that you can see a bit better. So first of all, we create our global variables here that are going to be accessed throughout the whole application, and we keep them private. Here we are referencing our database, the DML, the create statements, the DDL excuse me, the DDL commands here for the database. So this is the first statement that we create. Then we need to get access to some of these to give access so that we are able to access other variables and give access to the database in case. So in this circumstance, we want to grant this Java file access to this other Java file, so we use this context. That's why we're using context here. SQL database. This SQL database helps us use commands which will allow us to write to the database, to close the database, all the functions to manipulate the database will be in here, even inserting, as we'll see as we go down. So here we create a constructor of this DML class with a context, and we say we want this context to get access. Basically we want this database DML file to get access to this DDL file, so that we can reference, like if we are doing something like an insert statement, we want to insert whatever values we get in this class here and put them in another Java file in another class. So this is going to allow us to get access to that. So then we create an open statement to open our database. When we're opening our database, we want to make sure that we handle errors, any errors that we can run into, especially ones where if there's no data inside the database, then usually it will crash. Sometimes if you've coded Java before, you'll know you'll have to put that try and catch statement for your database when you are creating it. So that's why we're doing this. We're making sure that we prepare to handle for errors. So here you want to import this SQL exception class and make sure you import the android.database one, and then from there we say database, meaning this DDL, and we create an object of it, and we give it the context to say that no, we're asking for permission from this database, but we are assigning it. This is how we are going to access it through this variable here. We want to get access by using database here. So here we say, okay, this database, which is the SQL database, we say, okay, this SQL database, let us write, right? Because now we have access now to this other Java file. We want to say, okay, let us write to that database. So we say database.get writable database, which helps us write to the database. This is what the statement is for. Then the context we're returning is this context here, this one right here. So we just say return this. Then we want to create a DML command. right? So in this case, I created the one for an insert. We're inserting data into the database. So here I've put two columns, and then here in our DDL, how many columns we have? Okay, we got 5 columns in total, but we're only gonna put 4 because the ID doesn't need to be assigned in this. We don't need to add our own IDs because the ID is auto incremented. It will add by default itself whatever value it wants. So here I'm just going to create 4 more columns just like this, and rename these last two to column 3 and this one to column 4, right? So now all these columns here will be inserting data into those other columns in our table here. So next, what you want to do is you want to import the content values class. So content values are basically values that store values that are to be processed, basically. So when we're getting a value, maybe from our method for the inputs where we are getting the user's input, we want to store those values so that we can later on write them to the database, so we know that we are putting them inside our database. So what we do is we create an object of content values here, and we call that object store value, right? So here we say store value dot put. We are putting it into this database file, and we state the column. So here we by using these two methods, by using this grant access here, this is how we're getting access to this column file in this Java file from here, so that we can reference this value. That's how we are getting that access there with the context. So then whatever value that goes in here, you will put it in this column, and likewise for the second one. And I'm gonna just hit Control D to replicate this line twice. So I'll press Control D once and Control D one more time. So here what I can say is I change this column because that column's there, it's 4. Now I can see it's already referencing that, oh, I'm getting the context, I'm getting this access here to this column. So I change that to 4, and I'll change this one to 3 to reference this string up here, and likewise do the same for the other one, and here I'll just put 4. Right, so now we've put these whatever values we're going to get from the user, and we've put these values inside the database columns. So now what we want to do is we want to say database, meaning that we're writing now to the database. The writing function we're going to write is an insert function. So you say database.insert into this table, because now we got the access. So we insert into this table here, just put null as a value here for the column hack, and then all these values, all these context values. So you just say whatever we've referenced them as. So usually sometimes by default it uses the values one, so it can be whatever you want it to be in the state, but usually it should be something that makes sense. So I just want to show you here, it doesn't really matter how it's written, and then just like this, and then like this, you're done. I'll leave this code in the description below. Please tell me if you have any problems with it. Tell me if you need any other help, any other assistance. The next tutorial we'll see like how to use this database inside a working application where we're actually going to get input from a user and insert it into the database. Okay, thank you for watching. Please check the description below and check out my GitHub. I'll leave it in my GitHub repository for those who want to see it. Any other information, anything else you need, please write in the comments below. Thank you for watching.